Hi there! Welcome to my much belated follow-up video on this Dialtune Snare drum. I've owned this for several months now and I've played it very extensively. So I just wanted to make a follow-up video on my thoughts after owning it for a little bit longer. Some things that I like about the drum, some things I don't like about the drum. I want to debunk some myths that I see floating around the internet. And I thought it would be fun to compare it to some other snare drums. Just to kind of showcase its dynamic range, okay? So, first of all, now that I've owned it for so long, not an incredibly long amount of time, but I have quite a few other snare drums. I currently have more snare drums than usual because I repaired some for the school where I work. So I have two Ludwig Supraphonics. I just did a video on those. So, do I still like this drum as much as my other drums? The answer is yes. In fact, I like it better than any other drum I own because it sounds better than any other drum I own. Now, some of the other drums I own are sort of one-trick ponies. I have one that is basically an orchestral snare. I have a stave drum. That sounds really great, but only at certain tunings. This is far and away the most versatile drum I have, but it just sounds amazing at every tuning is the incredible thing, all right? So I'll just play a little bit here at my favorite tuning. I have upgraded my audio setup, so I want to give you a better idea of what it sounds like at different dynamic levels, and we'll start with the snare off. On. Hopefully it's clear that it still sounds amazing. I do have a little bit of muffling here. One other thing I've done is I experimented with all sorts of different snare wires, and I have landed, I'll turn those back on for now, I have landed on these Grover Concert Extreme CX. They are very expensive, but they're really cool. So if you're not familiar with Grover wires, actually I have a pair of their more standard. This is their combo, it's their middle of the range. It's a combo. They have the Jazz, whatever the middle is, and the Stadium, and this is the middle one, and it has, I think, 3 of their bright wires, and the rest flanking it are the dry wires. Grover snares are really cool. The issue I have with them is that if you're playing music that's really heavy on backbeats, sometimes these aren't the best choice, because the snare sound will start to get a little lost when you're playing fat, heavy backbeats, okay? And the cool thing about the Concert Extremes, as you can see, is they have 3 regular spiral snare wires in the middle. So they're really the best of both worlds, and I absolutely love them for this drum. I tried them on a different drum, and they didn't sound as good. So, one thing I love doing is experimenting with snare wires, and regardless of what kind of snare you own, I would recommend checking some out. The Grover wires I really like. They are very sensitive, especially the Jazz and the regular ones. Very, very sensitive. I also have a Stadium one, and that one's sensitive too, but I don't like the Stadiums as much, okay? And Black Swamp makes some heinously expensive cable ones, but those are really good too. They're a lot of fun, okay? The thing about this snare is that it has an incredible amount of body, okay? It's just a really full sound at every tuning, and it can go so much lower than any other drum I own. Now, I don't typically play drums, really tuned really, really low, but, just to sort of drive the point home, we're really gonna do something a little cool here. Okay, I have removed all tension from the head, so just take a listen to this. show me another snare that can go that low without rattling. Any snare drum that uses regular tension rods and lugs, if you tune it so that there's no tension on the batter head, they will rattle. So, and you can use something like a big fat snare drum, or if you don't want to pay those exorbitant prices, just cut out an old snare drum and place it on top. But that removes all rebound. It's really hard. You have to wrist everything out. And B, it reduces the volume a lot. Okay? So with this, you can just tune it really low, and it sounds amazing. And then very quickly, I really had that low. That a bit higher. Okay, that's good. And it's a bit higher than where we started, but close enough. Okay, so that's really fun. I have had a problem develop with this drum, which you might have been able to hear. I hope the microphone picks it up. Take a listen. The left knob has developed some kind of grittiness. It's very annoying. If you tune the snare side head up really high, then it's actually, sometimes I have to like reach with my right hand and use both to turn it. And I am a weak person, but still, it's just not as smooth as it was. I've taken it apart. Nothing looks wrong with it to me. So that's a little bit annoying. And also on this side, yeah, you can hear it. That sounds worse than it is. I can feel it, but this side isn't nearly as bad as the left side. So I don't know what's up with that. I keep meaning to send an email to Dialtune and see if they know what might cause that. I don't think it's a lubrication issue, but that has been a little bit annoying. The other thing about this drum that really annoys me is the weight. Okay, it's the perfect snare for studios. I mean, if you want to take one drum with you to a studio session, it should be this one, because it sounds so good at so many different dynamic levels, and you can so quickly and easily change the tuning in between songs. But for gigging, this would be very annoying to bring with you, okay? For two reasons. First of all, I weighed it, it's about 20 pounds. And that may not sound like much, but it's so much heavier than any other snare drum I have ever encountered. I know there are some cast, like bell brass or copper drums out there that are even heavier. Even iron drums like the Clevelanders, the very famous orchestral drums, are even heavier than this. But those are not as easy to attain. They're, even the cheapest cast drums you can get from Gretsch are like $1,000 drums. So these are certainly much more attainable. One thing I think Dialtune could do to reduce the weight is to use 8 lugs instead of 10. I can't figure out why they use 10 lugs. Maybe there's a reason, okay? But these add a lot of mass to the drum. And I really think if there were 2 fewer, it would help. Now let's talk about the other thing. This isn't, again, an annoyance if you're just using it at home or in a studio. It really doesn't fit on the vast majority of snare stands. So I'll take it off for a second. And I have another hoop here, okay? And you can see this is a triple flanged hoop, but most die-cast hoops, except some, like VK drums, they're a little different. But most die-cast and triple flanged hoops, you see that they only come out where the lugs go through, and then they come back in. So probably subconsciously, when you're putting it on a snare stand, a drum with regular hoops, you tend to align it so that the 3 points of contact are not on one of those plug points, okay? And if I get my tape measure here, we can see if I measure from the narrowest point on here, this hoop is 14 7/8 inches wide, okay? Now if I measure from the widest points, it is 15 and a little over a half inch. We'll call it 15 and a half inches wide, okay? The Dialtune snare drum at every point is just under 16 inches, okay? From here to here. Because it's not flanged inward. It can't be, okay? Now Dialtune says that if your snare drum won't open up to go on the upper portion, you can just put it here. And I don't recommend that. I think that's sort of ridiculous to recommend for two reasons. First of all, I tried it and the drum didn't sound as good. All of the weight of the drum was sort of on here. I think it was putting pressure on the bottom head. So it's sort of like on most snare stands, not this one, I'll get to this in a minute. On most snare stands, if you crank them up, it chokes the drum. I was getting a little bit of that effect. But the other thing is, this is 20 pounds, and it felt really unstable when I tried it on, granted it was a cheaper stand, but you know, I like my feet and toes, so I wouldn't be comfortable playing like that, especially if I was hitting really hard, okay? So I went out and I bought this Pearl stand with this gyro lock system. This is like the W140 S class of snare drum stands. It is super cool. And one of the best features about it is that the basket spacing is adjustable. So if I get a drum key here, you can move each arm in and out. And it goes all the way out to 16¼ inches. And there's a ruler here, it's marked. So I set it for the 15-inch one, which is perfect for the Dialtune. And then it has settings for 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10. So if you have a really small drum, you know, you can use this stand for it, okay? So I bought it used, and it was still really expensive. But the other nice thing about this is that it's just built like a tank. It's super heavy duty, which is great when you have a 20-pound drum. All right, and it has the OptiMount system, so it's really easy to adjust where you want to put the drum. And the final really cool thing are these rubber things here that actually clamp against the drum. And you can actually clamp the drum tight without affecting the resonance because it has this air gap here. So if you have a Dialtune Snare, I would recommend that you get one of these Pearl stands. Unfortunately, I forget the model number, but if you Google, do keep in mind they have different heights and they make a low height model. So with a 6.5-inch snare, for me, I like my drums somewhat high compared to some other drummers. I only have it sticking out about 1 inch. So if you have other drums that are like 8 inches deep, or you like your drum really low, go for the low height model. And they also have a concert height model. So I was familiar with this because the school where I teach has one of these concert Pearl stands, and I loved it. So it is nice to have, but I've never owned a snare drum where I felt like I had to upgrade my snare stand before until I got the Dialtune. With that said, one other thing I think Dialtune could consider is making a 13-inch version of this, an 8-lug 13-inch version. Then it would fit on any snare stand, okay, and it would be lighter, both because the shell would be smaller and because you'd only have 8 lugs. I really think they need to consider that. That would just be a great, great option. One thing I have heard or read online is people complaining that this snare is too wide and they cannot comfortably play. It's people who are maybe a little bit smaller. I'm not particularly tall, but I do have very long legs. That's not the case, okay? I think what's happening is that people are realizing, because this does not fit on most regular snare stands and it needs one that can accept at least 15-inch drums, they think that the actual footprint of the drum is wider than a regular 14-inch, and that's not true. Okay, as I mentioned, this, from the widest point to the widest point, is a little over 15.5 inches, and this hoop is a little under 16 inches. So really, this is less than half an inch wider than a regular snare drum. Because if you think about it, when you're setting up to play, okay, you don't set it up so that you can't set it up for the narrow part, because then your knees are going to be hitting, the lugs on your drum, which would be really painful, okay? So that's not true. If you were afraid to get a Dialtune because you thought it would be too wide, that's not a concern. You see, I have this set up. If I sort of rotated this stand around, I could actually bring my legs in even closer, but I tend to play with them out a little bit. So don't worry about that. If you read that online, it's perfectly fine, okay? Now, what I thought I would do, let me get this out of here, and we'll get this out of here. Goodbye. Okay. is just compare this drum to a Ludwig Supraphonic Brass Edition, which I have just repaired, refurbished, changed the strainer, changed the heads, changed the snare wires, and tuned. Okay? So, you know what, let's put this back on here, and I'll check the tuning here. Okay, so I'm going to crank this up a bit. A lot, I guess. I can't tell you how nice it is to have this dial tuning system, but it just makes changes so quick and easy. And I bet you, yeah, okay, so because the Dialtune drum is deeper, the timbre of the drum makes it sound lower than it is. Okay, that's pretty close. Okay. Let's hear the Dialtune Snare first. I'll just play a little bit. Okay, hopefully you can agree with me. That sounds wonderful. Now we're going to come over to the Supraphonic and turn the snare wires on, and I'll just play a little bit here. Okay, so if I just play these snares together, and I'm covering them with a towel so they don't vibrate against each other. Okay, of course the Supraphonic is the most recorded snare drum of all time, and it's a great drum. This drum is brass. It is a reissue brass edition, so it's not, you know, a really, really old one. And it has die-cast tubes, which is a better comparison for the Dialtune because this also has die-cast tubes. Okay? To me, at soft dynamics, the Dialtune isn't necessarily more sensitive, but I feel like I get more tone from the shell of the drum. Okay? To me, this sounds more like snarey, you know, like you're playing just on snares, okay? And then at higher dynamics, I basically feel the same way. This, to me, just sounds fuller, and I hear more of the shell. Of course, the shells are different. This is wood, this is aluminum. Yeah, I'm sorry, brass. And personally, I do prefer wood shells for the most part. This is not a bad sounding drum. The Supraphonic sounds wonderful. When I put it behind the drum set and I'm playing in context with other things, the differences become even more stark. To me, the Dialtune sounds much better on heavy backbeats. It really cuts through the mix and it just sounds like, you know, kind of like what you want a snare to sound for backbeat heavy music. Whereas this, I feel like I'm getting sort of a little bit too much brightness from the shell, but yet not enough shell sound at the same time compared to the Dialtune. Now, if you're a recording engineer, you may prefer the Supraphonic. Maybe you like metal snares better, you may prefer the Supraphonic. But I just thought it was an interesting comparison because, you know, everyone knows the Supraphonic and everyone loves the Supraphonics, okay? So that's the Supraphonic. Now, something is loose inside of that drum. I will have to take it apart and fix it. All right. Now, I actually, funny story, bought a Pearl Masters MCX 6.5 by 14 with a quilted Babenga veneer. And I thought it would be great to compare with the Dialtune, and it was a great drum. It sounded really nice, like really nice. And at every tuning, I thought the Dialtune sounded even nicer, and I ended up selling it to someone who was in need of an upgrade. And they got a good deal on it, so I don't have that. That would have been a good drum to compare. I mean, it was really well built, but, you know, we don't have it. What I do have is this drum. I won't go into the history to bore you because I feel like this video is already quite long. But this is a drum that I built quite a few years ago, and the shell is a mystery shell. No clue who made it. It's really weird. It is a 3-ply shell with very thick plies, and it's old. It's at least 80s or earlier. So no clue. I put a maple veneer on it. Okay, so 3 plies, not counting the maple veneer. Now let me just tune the dial tune to match this drum, which is much lower. Oh wow, that's basically perfect. Okay, we'll tune the snare side down a bit. A bit more. Okay, let's just see how they sound together. Okay, yeah, that's close enough for our purposes. Okay, let me just tighten that. Okay, so this is a 6 1/4 inch shell, and I believe the shell is maple. It looks like maple to me on the inside, so it's a closer comparison to the Dialtune because they're both wood drums, all right? And I love this drum. Now, this is kind of my workhorse drum. I let high school students play on it. It has die-cast tubes. The bottom one is a very old Premier die-cast tube, and then this is a Gibraltar. It is an 8-lug drum, which I love. I really like 8-lug drums. It has a Remo Renaissance RE, so a 2-ply head on the top, and an Evans Orchestral 300 on the bottom, so that both heads are a little bit thicker than the Dialtune, which I find works well with this drum. And I have these Tama Hurley snares on, which are very nice. Okay, so let's play these 2 drums together. Okay, so this drum actually, to me, sounds closer to the Dialtune than that Pearl snare. The Pearl snare was quite a bit drier than the Dialtune, so I actually think this is a better comparison. As you can probably hear, this drum is a lot messier, okay? Even if you tighten the snares up, it just has this kind of ring to it and this sort of sloppiness to it, which is great. It sounds really, really nice. And this drum is louder. It's a very loud drum. In fact, I'll leave the snares off and just listen. Okay, it's also the most resonant snare drum I own. In fact, probably if I put 2 pieces of muffling on here, that still rings longer than the Dialtune. So it's really resonant, and one of the reasons I like using this for marching band is because the sound carries really well. Okay? This drum does not tune up as high as the Dialtune. It will go high with these die-cast tubes, but it starts to choke out. And as I mentioned in my last video, the Dialtune doesn't seem to choke out ever. I have no idea why. Okay, so I don't want to demonstrate that here because it would take a long time to tune this drum, but the Dialtune at all tuning ranges certainly can go higher than this. Now, compared to the Pearl MCX I had, that drum also did not choke out. It could go super high, but it definitely didn't go as low as the Dialtune. And the Pearl was a 10-lug, okay? So there are always some inherent compromises with 8 versus 10-lug snare drums. I prefer 8 lugs. I feel like I can get everything I want out of an 8-lug drum, and I tend to like the feel a little better. But if you ever want a drum to go super high, sometimes that's difficult with 8 lugs, even with die-cast tubes, okay? But then with a 10-lug drum, they can go really high, but I find, especially with die-cast tubes, it's hard to get them to go low. So, you know, my solution to that is to have a lot of drums, okay? But if you want one drum that can go really high and really low, it's hard to achieve on a traditional drum, at least with die-cast tubes. And I love die-cast tubes. Okay, I don't think drums with triple flange tubes sound as good basically ever. So in that respect, the Dialtune really beats both of these just because it's so darn versatile. Definitely this is not the loudest drum that I've ever played. It is quite loud, but you know, I've played drums that are louder, and you know, this is definitely one of them. Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I really like this drum. I actually haven't played on this for a while, and now I'm remembering how much I like it. Also, it's super light, especially compared to the Dialtune. So, and I'm sorry I don't have the Pearl MCX with me to actually compare, but you know, again, it was just so much drier than the Dialtune. This is a little bit closer, especially when it's tuned down low. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this answered any lingering questions you had. I think I covered pretty much everything. I still love the drum. I still play it all the time. Often when I switch out my drum set snare for something else, you know, I play it for a few minutes and I'm just like, okay, time to bring back the Dialtune because it's just great. Oh, one other thing I want to talk about, feel. I don't think I addressed this in my last video. Drum feel, I can't convey this to you over the video, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. But some drums feel better than others to play even at the same tuning, okay? So in this case, neither of these really feel better than the other. This one feels softer, like the head has more give to it, and I think that's because it has only 8 lugs. But the feel of the Dialtune is wonderful. It's perfect at every tuning. Even if it's really high, it never feels tabletop tight, and when it's tuned down low, I still get like a decent amount of rebound from the sticks. So that's something that's a little, well, it's hard to convey, and you know, nebulous as far as manufacturing goes. You know, I built a lot of snares, and they all feel pretty good. I do have a 4-inch deep nickel over brass drum. It doesn't feel very good. It may be because it's so shallow, but it sounds good, especially at certain tunings, but it just feels like there's not a whole lot of give to the drum. And I don't like playing it very much for that reason, even though it sounds really good. All right, so the feel of the Dialtune is among the best that I have ever played. I will say, at some tunings, especially like medium-high tunings, the Pearl MCX gave this a run for its money. It was basically identical. I loved playing on that Pearl MCX drum. That was also really nice. So the Dialtune, from a feel perspective, feels wonderful. Okay? All right, that's actually it. I hope this answered all of your questions. If you have any other questions, you know, certainly let me know down in the comments. If you're looking to buy one of these drums, please buy a used Maker Series. I mentioned this in the first video, but the current generation, the price is lower than the Maker Series was, but they really cheaped out on the strainer, and I love this DW Mag strainer. The strainer is great, but really this adjustable butt plate is so nice. I know I talked about it last time, but it's just so easy to go from really tight. We'll actually bring the pitch up a bit to make it more, okay. I usually keep it in the medium setting, which is okay, and tighter. Just in seconds. Real loose and sloppy. To, I'm an orchestral player now. That's great. Obviously that's not exclusive to this drum, but I don't think you want to buy one of the later drums. It has, honestly, a really cheap looking strainer. I actually think, I could be wrong, but I think it's a World Max strainer and they sell for like $30. So, huge downgrade. I saw another one of these, the exact same one, for sale, I think on Reverb, but it might have been Facebook Marketplace, for the exact same price I paid for this one, $400. Not sure how much shipping would cost, but you can get a Maker Series for less than you can buy the Series 2, and it'll just be a better drum. Now, maybe they fixed in the Series 2 whatever has caused this roughness. I don't know. But this really is a minor annoyance, and I need to look into it more and see. Probably I can fix it. Probably I can take a Dremel and sand off wherever it's hitting, and then it will be fixed, okay? So again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll just play a little bit more, and I will talk to you next time.